On September 3rd, 1973, 6:28 p.m. and 32 seconds, a blue fly of the Calliphoridae species, whose wings can flutter 14,670 times per minute, landed in St. Vincent Street, Montmartre. At the exact same second, outside a restaurant, the wind was sweeping in under a tablecloth, causing the glasses to dance without anybody noticing it. Still at the same second, a sperm cell containing an X chromosome and belonging to Raphael Poulain was reaching the ovum of Amandine Poulain. 9 months later, a girl was born, Amèlie. From the first line of Jean-Pierre Jeunet's 2001 film Amèlie, the role of the past as a principal subject is clearly established. Nostalgia, defined by the Oxford English Dictionary as a sentimental longing or wistful affection for a period in the past, is the blood that courses through the veins of this film. From the plot, visual style and music, to the filmmaking itself, Amèlie is so nostalgia-filled that I would argue that it functions as a narrator in itself. The voice we hear speaking in the opening scene of the film is an omnipotent one that returns at several points to give us, the audience, backstories and extra information about characters we've been introduced to. Examining the role of this narrator through the context of the past functioning as a character in itself, I would argue that the voice we hear is the past personified, showcasing to us its influence over the present. The plot truly begins, as this introduction indicates, with the resurgence of the past upon the present. The past emerges in the form of a box hidden within the walls of Amélie's apartment. The whimsical Amèlie is charmed by the contents of the box, the childhood treasures of a man named Dominique Brotteaux, a man who she comes to learn lived in her apartment when he was a child. It is in trying to solve the mystery of the box and track its owner down that Amèlie comes into contact with most of the film's other characters. Thus, the discovery of the past is the inciting incident for all of the action in the film. In a 2011 edition of the French Review, Professor Dana Oshowitz stated that in Amèlie, the past functions rather like a character in the film, not only because it is the narrative thread that binds all of the other characters, but because in the scene where it is introduced into the film, the camera actually shoots from the point of view of the past. In the scene she writes about, the camera shoots from behind the wall, where the box is hidden, and Amèlie is framed outside by the hole created by the tile which has been knocked loose. The composition of the shot implies that we are viewing the action from the point of view of the hidden box, or the past that it embodies. Because this scene plays out so early in the film, it functions to force identification between the spectator and the past. Therefore, it is the movement of the past through Paris rather than just Amélie's personal adventure that we follow as the story unfolds. After Amélie's plot to return the box of childhood memories to its owner proves a success, she embarks on a mission of goodwill. She resolves that she will secretly help those around her in any way she can. Interestingly, almost all of these plot lines revolve around the past and nostalgia. When Amèlie discovers that Madeleine, her building's concierge, is caught up in the past, heartbroken for her husband who left her many years before, she attempts to replicate the effects she's witnessed of the past re-emerging. Madeleine's husband had run away with another woman before he died, leaving the concierge tormented by the past and her lack of answers. Amèlie constructs a fake letter from the man, making it seem as though it was recently discovered from an old plane wreck. This letter is actually a pastiche text, made up of letters Madeleine received from her husband when he was alive. Amèlie takes old, mundane letters and cuts and pastes them into something new, a passionate love letter apologising for his mistakes. This is not exactly an authentic past, but it is not entirely imagined either. The film itself is something of a pastiche text, I would argue. The Paris we see is a nostalgic, cut and pasted version of what Paris used to be. Although this time the intrusion of the past upon the present is somewhat fabricated, it continues the theme of the past imposing itself onto the present in order to drive the plot forward. Nostalgia and the past do more than narrate and guide us through the film, in my opinion. Nostalgia envelops every aspect of what we see and hear. The nostalgic feel of this film is fully immersive. One of the most obvious ways that Jeunet invokes nostalgia is in the colour palette and colour grading of the film. The highly stylized palette used in Amèlie favours the colours red and green. These strong contrasting colours show up everywhere and add to the storybook nostalgia of the film's visual style. In some instances, the colour grade has a faded postcard sepia, and in others, for example the usage of the colour blue, seen here, here and here, the grading is saturated and stylized. In her 2007 book, Amèlie, French Film Guide, author Isabelle van der Sheldon writes that, by mixing sepia and saturated hues, it also blurs temporal markers and favours a sense of timelessness, often associated with postmodern cinema. This self-conscious use of colour revives the paradox of high technology, serving a retro-nostalgic visual style, which had been a distinctive feature of the cinéma du look of the 1980s. The music of Amèlie, which has been playing throughout this video, is also used to invoke a sense of nostalgia and Paris of days gone by. Full of accordion and waltz tempos, the soundtrack instantly draws to mind Paris in the 20s and 30s. Both self-consciously nostalgic and contemporary, Tiersten's soundtrack thus falls into the category of postmodern music, thus complementing the visual features of the film. It also reinforces the retro mood of the film. Amèlie, the film, much like Amèlie the character, sets about reinventing the past by appropriating and reworking existing images. The film exhibits characteristics of both heritage films and cinéma du look. It is reminiscent of these movements in its attention to colour, framing, and use of pastiche, as mentioned earlier. By borrowing images from well-known or iconic films, Jeunet further drives home the immersive nostalgia of Amèlie. The overall portrayal of Paris in Amèlie is in many ways a collage of the 1930s and 40s film representations of the city. Many shots in Amèlie directly echo various films by Marcel Carné. Most notably, the scene in which Amèlie skips stones on the Canal Saint-Martin, which featured prominently in Carné's 1938 film Hôtel du Nord. Audrey Tautou, who plays Amèlie, is also dressed in a manner that evokes Arletty, a French film star of the 30s and 40s, and who appeared in several Carné films. The overall whimsy of the film and the predominance of the colour red are also evocative of Albert Lamorris's La Balloon Rouge from 1956. Amèlie also borrows from the films of the Nouvelle Vague, particularly the films of François Truffaut. Jeunet has even acknowledged that he references Truffaut's filmmaking intentionally at several points in Amèlie. The use of Montmartre as a setting, for example, evokes Truffaut's 1959 film The 400 Strokes, and Amèlie, like Truffaut's protagonist Antoine, looks to the cinema to escape the world. Even more tellingly, in a scene where Amèlie is sitting in a movie theatre, the film she is watching is Truffaut's Jules and Jim. In conclusion, I believe that a nostalgia-tinted view of the past is the blood that courses through the veins of Jeunet's Amèlie. It runs through the filmmaking, the plot, the music, colour grade and characters, and reaches through time to deliver us the whimsical and romantic tale of Amèlie Poulain.